Two, one. We should be live. Hello, everyone. Happy New Year. Um, I am back and I am joined by Ryan, the winner of Warzone Atlanta. Hi, Ryan.
Hello.
Um, and I am doing an interview. We're talking about your list, Ryan, and we're recording this the day before New Year's. But it'll only come out like in a week or something like that. So, so happy holidays. I hope you all got into the new year well. And the world hasn't blown up since we recorded this. Otherwise, post-apocalypse, you're not playing games anymore.
We
Um,
might be.
yeah, you never know. Sitting in a bunker somewhere. Um, so Ryan, you won the Warzone Atlanta. Could you just describe how was the event? Was it a nice event to attend?
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. So I'm in Indianapolis, so it was a good 6.5 hour drive,
Yeah,
and it was absolutely worth it to me. Venue was good. John Ross had just absolutely gorgeous tables, some of the best I've seen at a wargaming event.
yeah,
Um, Everything ran on time. We had, like, with your interview with him, there was hot lunch every day. It was
yeah.
delicious. Uh, Good competition. It, Pretty much everything you could ask for
Yeah,
in a
it sounds
wargaming event.
like he's sort of I felt like I had seen it all and been to the best tournaments in Europe and all of that. And he ups us. I don't know what it is with you Americans. You have to do better than us all the time. It's a
Uh,
thing. That was really cool. That was really cool. Made everyone envious. I can tell you that much. So, Ryan, what is your hobby experience? Could you just tell the viewers a little bit about yourself? When did you start playing bold action, and how long have you been playing it for? And what's your record basically? What have you won? What have you lost?
all right. So I'm a longtime tabletop war gamer. I've been doing it since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
But this uh, last Christmas, so pretty much a year from today, I was uh, just looking for another game to play because I was predominantly playing Infinity, which
Yep.
is a miniature skirmish game, and I was just with my work life and with kids and everything else. It's very difficult for me to get to a weekly gaming event, so I'm more able to get to tournaments or a couple day convention where I can just block out that whole amount of time and get a lot of
Yep.
gaming in a short period of time.
Yep.
So I was looking for a second game to play at conventions because I didn't want to play the whole thing the whole time. And I'd seen some bolt action stuff. I'd seen some videos. I'd heard about it. I think John Russell gave a demo at Adepticon once that I saw. So I was like, oh, maybe I'll pick that up. So I picked up the Band of Brothers box, kind of like most people, and
Like everyone else.
like
Yeah.
everyone else.
Yeah.
I think I picked it up on the way back from a Christmas function. I had some extra cash in the pocket, picked it up at the local hobby store, and put that together. And was like, oh, this is kind of fun. Did a demo down in kind of played around in the basement with it. And
Yep.
then um, Adepticon was coming up, and I think it's March. So I picked the first stuff up in December. Saw Adepticon was coming up in March. So I picked up the U.S. Airborne Starter Army box and pretty much hustled to get all that put together. And I went to Adepticon and played and I picked up a few local games with local guys at lower points as I got
So
stuff
you had
painted.
actually tried a few games before
Yeah, I
doing it at
cut with the
at
local
Adepticon.
guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I went to Adepticon and I played Andrew's 450 point combat patrol tournament, and there were I want to say between 35 and 40 people playing in that, if I
Oh,
remember
that's pretty
correctly.
good. Yeah.
And I ended up winning that right out of the gate. So
Take
uh,
notice, people. New players going to tournaments, winning their first tournament. Ooh. Take notice. I was one myself. Let me just
yes,
say that.
and I mean, if you played 40K, the game's very intuitive.
Yeah.
The move, shoot, charge.
Yeah.
The Obviously, I like the system with the order dice pull and everything. That's why we all play it.
Yeah.
I think.
That is, and I mean, you played it Infinity. I've played Infinity, and it sort of reminds me of that game as well because you're activated all the time
Yes.
instead of you go,
at
I go of
the minimum
Warhammer,
engagement.
for instance. Yeah. So
Um,
you're always engaged and you're always doing something. That's really nice. Yeah.
and then so then the next day we played there was a doubles tournament, and me and a local guy played. We middle of the pack on that one, and then played a league, a grow league over the summer at the local store. I won that. There was a tournament at the end of that. I won that, and then uh, we had another local tournament here. I placed maybe top 5. I can't remember exactly. And then I went to Warzone Atlanta and then won that. So that's my over the last year. Oh, I forgot WTC.
Yeah.
I also went out to. So I did Adepticon, and then I finagled a billet on the U.S. Team 2 for
Yeah.
WTC, and went out there and was handed an army I'd never used before at 1,000 points, which I hadn't played before either. At that point, I'd never even played a 1,000-point game. And
Yeah.
then
A new
I
player going to the most competitive tournament in the world. So how did you
and
do?
well, I have note too on your meta analysis of that. I didn't have any of the things that I was supposed to have, and had some of the things I shouldn't have had in my list too. I will note. I was playing
I
charging,
remember. I
no
remember.
mortar, no flamethrowers.
Yeah.
Anyway, I went six. It was 6 rounds, correct? I think I went 5-1, which I lost to Achilles out of Spain.
And that is very respectable. I mean,
Yeah, I
Achilles, I have beat him, but he is a difficult guy to beat. He's really good.
yes, wonderful opponent, but he thumped me pretty
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Right. So you're doing well for yourself. Sort of an American star player starting out right now this year. Um, just to remind, because we have actually your list got here. I've featured it on this channel before, so if you want an in-depth analysis of just me talking about the list, you can go and watch that video. But right now, I just wanted to remind people what it is that you actually brought. So I'm going to share my screen here for just a sec. Hope you can see it. So this was your list of 1,000 points, 15 order dice. US reinforced platoon. A lot of guys were bringing reinforced American platoons. In my estimate, that was weird. But then be able to talk a little bit about why people were bringing what they were. There are differences in the European meta and in the American one. I think maybe, or maybe it's just Warzone Atlanta. Um, The lieutenant, inexperienced attacks, 2 veteran infantry groups, the skirmishers, 7 men with BARs, double tough fighters, double boss, double tough fighter. So that is good infantry units you have here. Medic, chaplain, very cheap order dice, and another infantry unit with what's that? That's 7. That's 9 men.
Yep,
Again, tough
there should
fighters.
be 2 9-man and an 8-man.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, that's me. 2 9-man, 1 8-man. Yes. We have a medium mortar, regular with a spotter, sniper team, flamethrower team, bazooka team, all the teams because you're playing Americans, aren't you? Love them
Yes.
teams. Recce Jeep, and then the rest was here. We have it here. So that's the Recce Jeep. We have the Hellcat, which you're going to talk to me about. You're going to explain that to me. And 2 Jeeps for the small teams and a Dodge truck. That was it. Very nice little list. So, Ryan, I think we need to talk about why you're doing what you're doing and the the full process behind this because and this is something that I always feel like when I'm starting to look into different countries and the meta that they're doing, I get confused, and there are things that confuse me here. But let's start with just what you faced at this tournament. What in your estimation, how many players that you were there? How many were competitive players? How many were like rookie key players? How many were just there as casual river counter type people?
Right.
What do you feel like?
There was a pretty good mix at the tournament. There were certainly some players that were brand new, had hardly played before at all. There were some were players focused on bringing a beautiful army that was composed around a theme. The guy that
Mm,
won the best painted army had a beautiful, I think it was a Panzer IV or Panther. It was gorgeous, and the list was
yeah.
kind of built around that. Not necessarily didn't fare super well, but had a beautiful
No, you
army that's
typically
not
don't with a
typical.
Panther.
Right.
It can be
Right.
fun to play, but
Yes.
it's difficult to win.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unlike the Hellcat.
Yep.
Sure. Uh, I out of the 5 opponents that I personally played,
Yep.
I think if we go down this list, I ended up playing, I think, some of the more competitive ones over the course of the tournament. Um, so I've got them here in my notes on kind of how they
Mm,
finished, not
yeah.
necessarily the order I played them. But Randy, I played him. He ended up finishing third
Mm,
overall. He had a army with a couple squads of U.S. Rangers. He had the M3, had the half track that has the autocannon and the double heavy machine guns.
yep.
Felt like a pretty well put together list. Kind of had more what you would expect.
Yep.
And then I played,
A very skirmish heavy American list as I remember it.
yes,
Yep.
yep. I played Joe, who he and I played at the top table in the last round. He's the one that had the double M3 Australians with the Gurkhas and
Yep.
all of the things.
The nastiness. Yeah.
Yes. I will say that was a very hard fought game. The tipping point is when one of my tough fighter veteran squads assaulted his Gurkhas and won. So
Oh, that's so good when that happens.
yeah. So that was
How did you actually like cut him down a bit first before you assaulted him, or did you just take on a full squad of Gurkhas?
yeah, we just went for it and it paid
No.
off.
Oh, you have to be lucky to do that. But okay,
Yeah,
if
it
you manage
was
to do it, enjoy the
I
win.
certainly was lucky. But that was where the weight of dice, even with that 9-man squad with all being tough fighters, the weight of dice prevailed on that.
Yeah.
Um, and then I played Alan, who finished 6th overall, and he had
Yep.
the 20 order die British list.
Yeah.
He
With
had
the Indian special rule and everything. Yeah, that was a
yes,
nasty list as well.
yeah, and that was a rough game. I played him first round out of the tournament,
Oof. Oof. Yeah.
so that was a good way to start. And then I played Steve, who he actually rode down with me from Louisville. He played a German list and won best Axis. He ended up finishing 7th. And then, oh, sorry, Alan with the 20 dice, he finished 6th. Joe finished 4th.
Yeah.
Steve finished 7th with best Axis. And then I played Jan with a beautiful German list, but I believe he had the Panzer IV in it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I also had a very fortunate result on a close combat on the west side of our board there that went my favor. Uh, he ended up finishing 14th.
Yeah.
So I ended up playing most of the top end of the tournament. The two
Yeah.
people I played that finished in the top 5, top 7 that I didn't
Randy and
play were the
Joe.
ones who
Yeah.
were on the other top. They were playing for 3, 4, and
Yeah.
I never got a chance to play them.
So you had pretty tough opponents, but when you end up winning a tournament, you're supposed to have faced some good opponents. You're not supposed to
Yep.
to
No,
just do a submarine and just end up in
no.
the first place. So
And
that sort of works out.
and
So the
my
only one, yeah. Sorry.
some people in tournaments they try to think about I want to get some, but not all the points. I go for all the points all the time.
Yes. Yes. Um, and that's pretty good. The only like fight that was maybe a little bit easy was against Jan, right? He came
Yeah.
14th. Um, So, and he had a German list, maybe not the best list that you could bring. Um, now, I actually asked out into my listeners, viewers, about what they wanted me to talk to you about. And one of the
Oh,
things that
okay.
they brought up was you had a Dodge and you had two Jeeps. Did you use that in a combined push, or did you like lurk down behind? How did you use that in your tactics on the board?
So I'm still learning how to articulate what I'm doing in bolt
Yeah.
action. Um, but thinking about how I've played consistently and thinking about the matches I've played, uh, I generally hold the Jeeps and the truck with the 8-man squad, certainly back, if not in reserve. I probably in half the games I played, they actually held those units in reserve.
Yeah.
And I'll deploy out my army with hopefully the Hellcat off to one side, like off to a flank with that extended range. It's a good place for it, if not in reserve as
Especially
well.
if you have like a line of sight that goes like
Yep,
diagonally across the
exactly.
table. Yeah.
There was playing against Steve, the German player. There was I played on a city table, and there was a road that kind of cut diagonally across the entire
Oh,
board.
lovely.
And
Yeah.
the near end of the diagonal came into my deployment zone. I was able to pop around some ruins and have line of sight pretty much cutting the board in half. It was a great place for it.
Yeah.
Um, but I will typically deploy out my infantry kind of on one side of the board. I'll kind of pick a middle line and kind of deploy most of my stuff on one side, starting with more of the fixed pieces, and then the infantry kind of go in last. And then pretty much as soon as that game starts, I begin shifting on a diagonal up the board. It's kind of
Okay.
how I find myself moving.
Yeah.
So because typically your opponent will deploy across from wherever you deploy across, and you begin that exchange. But as I begin moving on that diagonal, they rotate in
Yeah.
with it, and then I bring on my stuff from my board edge and essentially create a flanking maneuver by moving my infantry up on a diagonal. It allows their army, as they face off against it, for me to come in and hit the side or a weak spot in their line with the truck, with the flamethrower, with the bazooka.
That's very interesting. As you move forward there with your infantry, that's pushing forward, right? The infantry
Right.
is the tip of
Yeah,
your push.
but on kind of a diagonal movement, because
Yeah.
with those infantry being able with taking advantage of that American rule with the rifles, you can hoof pretty quick across that board.
Yeah. Skirmishing as you go, shooting as you go.
Mhm.
Yeah. Um, will you before the game will you choose where to make that push? So
Yeah,
you'll choose I'm going to go that way, and what are you looking for when you make that choice?
I'm looking for what will one cover my approach if I need it, so where I can isolate enemy targets
Yeah.
and maybe just deal with one threat at a time while I'm going across the board, or is there a way up the board where majority of their army, if I deploy here and they deploy kind of where I anticipate that they will, based off of they're not going to just deploy out in the open. They're going to try to find their best deployment as
Yeah.
well. They're away from where I deploy that I can move up the board out of line of sight of most of his army and pick my targets.
Mm.
Is there a way? And again, we play on maybe a little more dense terrain over
Well,
here.
at least in Denmark, we also have a dense terrain, but the
Okay.
WTC, if that's what you're comparing it to, was very sparse for many tournaments.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I would expect to have a lot more terrain on a normal standard bold action table, at least European standard. UK that can vary a lot, but at least for mainland Europe, we're used to more terrain than the
Mhm.
WTC.
So that's kind of when I'm looking routing up the board. Is there ways I can do it where I don't have to slog through difficult terrain but can
Yeah,
stay out of line of sight? That's what I'm looking for.
yeah, right. And then the your reserves, will they hit the tip of the enemy army like in one go, or will you send them in waves?
Yeah, when I try to I generally try to go all in at once as best
Yeah,
as you can coordinate it, where you give them all of the threats to deal with at once. make them make bad choices or hard
Yes.
choices.
Yes.
Hard choices that turn into bad choices is kind of what I want to have
Yeah.
happen. Where if I start slowly feeding them units, I'm giving them the order dice pull advantage of being able to say, oh, there's a flamethrower here, but there's nothing else I have to deal with. I can
Yeah.
send
Yeah.
everything at that.
Yeah. Do you
And I
have
think
sorry. Yep.
that's where I think I like those big veteran units with the tough fighter, because if I feed a bazooka into a ruin and I've got another big squad in the ruins next to it, do they use their M3 to dump 23 machine gun rounds into a bazooka team because they have to deal with it?
Yeah.
And then the bazooka team goes down and now they're not killing it.
Yeah.
Or do they send infantry into assault it or shoot it? But then you have to deal with that big squad of veterans coming out and dealing with
Yeah.
whatever you send after the bazooka.
Those tough choices that usually pressures your opponent either to make the wrong choice or to make a suboptimal choice, which is what you want basically. The odds of him making mistakes are much greater, so I really like that.
And that's
Um,
maybe coming from Infinity. It forces him into a situation where I regularly get to trade up.
yep,
Um,
exactly. That trade up is the key here. Yeah. Um, will you typically throw in your dodge and the 8-man veterans first, and then make him pick whether or not to kill that, and then follow up with the bazooka or the flamethrower, or will you do it the other way around?
um, I try to keep the mobile units in coming in as late in the turn as I can,
Yeah,
because again, those are you get one shot with a flamethrower, you get one shot with a bazooka.
you do.
So I apologize. Um, if the again, if I can bring those in at the end of the turn, late in the dice count, it gives me a better chance of using them early in the next turn because
Yep.
he's had less opportunity to try to
So you get that double move before he actually can do anything to stop you, if you're lucky.
correct. And it also still plays the cards a little closer to your chest too. The longer you hold those highly mobile units back, the more opportunities it gives me to pick where they're going to be most efficient, and makes him guess a little bit where they're going to go.
Yeah, that is always good. Right. Now let's talk about the elephant in the room. My biggest question was the Hellcat. What is up with the Hellcat? I, I know people who are great fans of that Hellcat, and I am not. And for me, it's a question of one, it's not very armored. Two, it's open topped. So, what is it that attracts you to the Hellcat here?
I assume it's a beautiful model isn't
It
sufficient.
is. It's it's a gorgeous model. It's a gorgeous little tank. I love it. But no, it's not sufficient for me.
Um,
So
just strictly from the hobby inside, though, it is a gorgeous model. I
it
love the
is.
look of it.
Yeah.
Also, thematically, even though I'm running veteran infantry, I'm using the paratrooper models
Yeah.
for those. Um, Thematically, the Hellcat supporting the paratroopers works as well. And I do make concessions for that because I do. It's something that brings me joy.
Yeah.
But maybe an anecdote helps here. One of a formative list building event I went to was back in the 5th edition Warhammer 40K days. So it's been a minute. My buddy and I went to a doubles tournament, and it was a good drive. It was from Denver up to Cheyenne.
Yeah.
It was a small point team tournament. It's kind of a combat patrol team tournament um, equivalent, and it was 5 rounds in one day. It was a lot of rounds, good
Mm,
sized tournament. And we sat down and we looked at, you have to build your list entirely different for a small point team
you do.
tournament.
Yeah.
You're very limited in what you can do.
Yeah.
And instead of looking at what we had and what we should bring, we just sat down and opened it up in the entire spectrum of what's available to the 40K community. If we had all the resources to build a list,
Yeah.
what would we build as what we anticipate the most powerful list you could bring at this point level?
Yeah.
And it was essentially we came down to an orc horde, just
Yeah.
maxed out orc boys at
Yeah.
that point level be a very difficult threat to deal with. So then we reverse engineered that. It's like, so what do we have in our list that if we built it not for winning majority of the games there, but for beating just solely that list, because we're both very competent players.
Yeah.
And like we can figure it out for something if it's not geared for. But if we built a list just for dealing with that, what would we bring? And that's what we brought. And I think that played a couple of random new guys that had been playing on the kitchen table at home and just brought whatever they had in their collection, and it was all completely out of what you would anticipate seeing there, and it was a pain to get through there. We did, but it was real rough. By the time we made it to the top table at the end of the 5 rounds, we ran into exactly the list that we built our list for. It was an orc horde boys list, and this is top. They're both very competent players,
Yeah.
and with the optimal list. And I think we tabled them in turn 2.
Nice.
I mean, it was the easy. It was a walk in the park. It was the easiest match of the entire tournament. And I think I know the M3, the double M3, the Gurkha list. That is, I was like, I know I'm going to run into that when I go down there. And I was like, I have to be able to deal. If I can deal with that, I can work through anything else when I get down there. So, like, what do I use as an anti-light tank? What do I need? And I've got a bunch of, I don't think they're ever going to target the chaplain or the medic, but I've got some smaller stuff. I've got mobile things that can stay out of line of sight. I've got large infantry squads that can weather a barrage of machine gun fire. I've got
8-man veterans in hardcover. They're not going to die, not even to the 18 shots of a Stewart.
They're going to shake off the pin. They're going to keep going.
Yeah.
And then how do I get to them? How do I deal with the problem there? So obviously I've already talked about the maneuvering, trying to stay out of sight. That's the best way. But then how do I actually deal with the problem? And if I take another M3 on my own, either he's going to have 2 and I'm going to get outgunned in that fight.
Yeah.
It's also got a light anti-tank gun on it.
Yeah.
So, which you're shooting against armor 8, I believe, right, on the M3.
Yeah.
So you can ping away at each other, but it's not going to be an efficient battle.
No, it's
not.
And
I was like, so that redirected me. I took the M18 Hellcat specifically because I knew I'm going to be fighting Stewarts, the M3. That's why I brought it. And I brought the bazooka in the Jeep and the flamethrower in the Jeep because those are also excellent at killing light armor tanks. And they're fast, they're mobile. So even if that M3 is buried behind a building somewhere or hiding somewhere from the Hellcat, I can run those guys up into the building, drop the flamethrower, force him to recce, or he's going to be this whole time thinking, do I want to dump all those machine gun shots into that veteran squad? Because I see he's got these other things playing.
Yeah.
And I've got my stuff hidden for late in the turn to where I have 15 order dice in the list, which forces he's going to have to make order dice decisions. And if that flamethrower, if that Jeep runs up, because it's got a good movement on it, it's small, it can get through alleys, it's very maneuverable. I drop that bazooka into a ruin next to that M3. Is he going to recce away? If he does, now I move my Hellcat up around the building and because it's got that 72-inch range, I think, on that. And it's going to force some bad decisions, those suboptimal choices.
Yeah.
And I've got 3 vectors with which I can attack these tanks. And it's going to either kill them or it's going to force them out of the game to be on the defensive, using the recce move.
And you can also sort of control the board with that Hellcat because on ambush somewhere as we talked about in the diagonal, that can sort of cut the board in half. So there's a lot of really nice options with one of these.
And specifically when dealing with the M3, I've got the range on it because my half range is good much further out. And then just on the sheer damage output, if you want to start exchanging shots with me, if you roll a 1 to pin, I'm already got the advantage in the actual shooting because I've got the range. I've usually set up and cover. I've got that advantage, so I'm not doing the move and shoot to get into the fight and forcing them to come to me. And then I also have the advantage where if I hit them, obviously a 1 is an automatic failure for penetration. But as soon as I roll a 2, I'm glancing it, and anything
Yeah.
higher than that's a penetrate, if not the
Yeah.
massive.
So you're almost guaranteed a kill here.
Well, I can roll 1 still.
Yeah, you can roll the 1, and it does happen. but
Uh,
but yeah, is that also why you're not bringing an HMG in on the Hellcat, because you're not actually using it in a role where that would make sense?
Correct. It's usually going to be out of range or hard to hit, especially with the only 3 shots. I also, to be honest, I couldn't scrounge up 25 points.
Uh,
If it was,
yeah, yeah, you're gonna have to take off a medic or something
and
in order to do that.
that's where it, that's where it came down to: do I want the order dice or do I want the HMG?
Yeah.
And I definitely picked the order dice over the HMG.
Mm. Which is an valuable lesson for anyone viewing this. Order dice are sometimes way more worth than actual extra DACA, extra equipment for you guys. Sometimes the order dice are just better.
And to belabor that, if I get, as I mentioned earlier, with the deploying the Jeep units, the small man teams, doing that late in the turn and then getting late turn shot, early pull, second turn, or the next turn. That's where that extra order dice can come in handy. Where if you're looking at HMG, really in the whole scheme of things, it might put a pin on something that's probably not going to kill a light armor. I would
No, it's
much
not.
rather get, I'd rather get 2 shots with the main gun. That extra order dice might be buying me an extra shot with the main gun on the Hellcat
Mm.
early next turn when I really need it, or with a
Yeah,
flamethrower early next turn. Much prefer the order die.
yeah. Right. Okay, so that's the Hellcat. I surrender. It may have its uses.
And
um,
I, what we're talking about it specifically, I will note I killed, I believe over the course of the game, 2 M3s. Over the course of the tournament, I killed 2 M3s with it, killed a recce Jeep, I killed the armored half track with the autocannon, double HMGs. I killed a motorcycle with sidecar, which
oh,
that might have been
that's one dead motorcycle.
it was. But it was pivotal in the game where it did. I needed, it was the very first round against Alan, the 20 order dice British player. I think the first game was essentially kill points, who
Mm,
kills the most, and the
yeah.
final kill dice on that was 4-2. So I got
Ooh,
exactly what I needed to win on that one.
yeah.
And the Hellcat was instrumental in that. Uh,
Right.
sorry,
Um,
move on.
right. My viewers also asked, why no SMGs on the veteran sniper team? And I've known other American players. I have a close buddy who's in my club who plays Americans and always brings SMGs on his sniper teams. You don't. Is that a matter of points again?
That was probably the number one thing is just I couldn't find 2 points. I will, if I'm a couple points short here or there, I will put SMGs on them. But that's one of the that's what I use at the very end of my list building. That's one of the,
Yep.
uh, I think I have this in my notes later. There's an American financial counselor called Dave Ramsey.
Yeah.
You get a budget, you stick to the budget, you don't deviate from the budget. And when I'm list building, I make my budget of these are the things I have to have
Yeah.
for me to feel okay about the list. And that's
There
not,
are
that's one of the,
must-haves and nice-haves, nice to haves.
that's a,
Yeah.
that's a nice have. Um,
Yeah.
uh, Also on it, there's a couple other considerations. They do have pistols. The American sniper and spotter have pistols, so they already have the tough fighter. If it, and then I kind of have an opinion that if you're needing to use your SMGs on your sniper, they're kind of in for a rough go already. So
Well,
it's
that depends on whether you want them to do double functions, right? Because most
right.
of the game they're sitting there, they're board control. They may be able to, if the opponent makes a mistake, they may be able to take out a small team. But most of the time, for me at least, they're board control.
I'm sorry, I lost your audio there. Sorry, I lost the audio. I didn't hear what you. I don't think anything's muted on my part.
Nope, that was me. That's fine.
Okay. Board control.
Yeah. So my sound went away as well.
Nope, I'm good now. I've got you.
Okay. No, I just said that snipers for me are about board control, and at some point that board control becomes redundant more or less because everyone is in the center of the table anyway. So for me, sometimes the idea of having them do another job, going out hunting other small teams or going up to an objective, can be alluring, I guess. But that also depends on when.
I certainly, when I've had the points, I put the SMGs on there, and I've used them for that very role, and
Yeah.
it's effective. So I would, just in this particular list, it didn't work out that way. I also, I don't know if deploying them aggressively is the phrase I want to use, but I write my snipers off as a casualty at the beginning of the game. I've made that mental calculus of like, that's an order dice my opponent's going to get.
Yeah.
And I deploy them in a way where they're very aggressively deployed, usually pretty far up in a building where it's going to take time if they wanted to get down and fight. But I view them, they're 50 points on regular, they're 65 on veteran. If he's shooting a mortar at that building and it's not hitting my infantry, if he's putting, if he's got in that list where he's got a Panzer IV, if he puts one round of HE into the building to deal with the snipers, that's one round of a 200 some point tank not shooting at my other stuff. So I have a
That's
kind
all.
of a cavalier
That's all good. Yeah.
attitude on the snipers. So
Yeah.
if they soak up 3 rounds of something trying to range in on them and then it kills them, that's okay with me.
Yep. Right. Next question is a tough fighter on all your infantry choices. That's a lot of extra points that you're pouring into those infantry choices, but they are veterans. Do you actually use that for close combat? How useful is it in your estimation? And if not for close combat, then what?
One of the things, so my anticipation was to use it for close combat. Over the 5 rounds of Atlanta, I found really the only ones that got stuck in were the ones in the Dodge. And then there was one mission where the secondary objective was killing other squads in close combat, essentially scalping NCOs was the mission, which was I played Brandy, the other American player for that one. Probably one of the most fun missions of the tournament. Really was a lot of fun, good hard fought mission. So one, I'm kind of reevaluating that tough fighter on those veterans. That may be something that disappears in future lists. That said, especially if they go to regular, you made a comment to me like, why not make them regular squads for much less? And
my thought was that at least that if you're just using them for skirmishing, if you're not going to really push against enemy units, then regulars might just do the job for cheaper.
There might be so there might be some regular infantry that just showed up in the mail and a couple more Dodge 3/4 tons.
Always very useful. Always useful.
Joking aside, though, that is something that you mentioned and I've been considering. And where I've actually maybe come down is, back up to the original question. What do I actually find them useful for? When that 9-man squad is moving on that diagonal, kiting my opponent, pulling them with me, I found that they can't just let you run around the board because that's how you win games, is by taking the board. But they don't really want to get super close because I've got the advantage with the rifles, with the BARs. I've got the range advantage against other similar infantry squads. They don't want to get stuck in because that tough fighter on them, they don't want to come charging at you. They don't want to get overly aggressive close. Like if they've got, maybe they've got SMGs or assault rifles or whatever else, 2 or 3 of them in their squad, that ups the cost of their squad, so reduces their other options across the army, but it's not enough to deal with my squad in close combat. And then when they're starting to take those SMGs, assault rifles, other things, it's also reducing the number of rifles they have in the squad. So they're also not as good in the long range shootout. So again, suboptimal choice for dealing with my guys. So where I found that to be maybe the most effective is projecting a bubble of like, don't come near me.
Yes.
Like, and I'm willing to pay a model to make
You
my
should
opponent
be.
not want
For 1 point a model, that projection of pushing away potential enemies is really worth it. I'm not saying don't bring Tough Fighter. Definitely on your veterans, I think you should. If you're using them like you're describing here, because you're using them very aggressively for skirmish units.
And I played them very aggressive. I pushed up the board. I took ground early, and I obviously can't speak for my opponents, but seeing how they react to that, it was I felt like all of my, why are all these people playing so reserved? And I was like, oh, it might have something to do with the fact that I'm pushing these guys up the board and my opponent is not wanting to come up and engage that.
Yeah.
And as I started to realize that over the course of the tournament, I played them more and more aggressive. And I felt like for most of my games, my opponents were pinned back in their deployment zones, maybe only bringing up a squad of engineers, a squad of Gurkhas. And then when they're only bringing up those one or two, kind of the opposite of what I said, it's allowing me to concentrate my efforts on those few squads that are being brought up that they feel enough confidence in.
Right.
But I am considering a couple options moving forward in list building is reducing that squad from 9 down to 8 and throwing them in the Dodge 3/4 tons and just having 3 squads of those in the trucks. And
well, that's a very different playstyle from what you've been describing to us so far. Then it suddenly turns into to mechanized, motorized warfare, which is definitely something else compared to this very, very methodical skirmish that you've been describing.
yes.
So it might be a nice change at some point, at least to try something different. But
I love those Dodge 3/4. The Dodge 3/4s are just phenomenal.
They are the best trucks. I wish the Brits got them.
I didn't have the actual ones for the Atlanta. I had a Citroën, the French truck, from my Belgian army. One of the highlights was, and I meant to mention this earlier, why that medic and chaplain and then the inexperienced lieutenant is I use those to sit in my empty transports.
Yes.
So I would often
keep them alive. Yeah.
Yep. So because even the Jeeps have 3-man occupancy, so you can put a flamethrower team and the chaplain in there.
Yeah.
And keep them alive. But I had the chaplain standing on the flatbed doing his on the back of that Citroën, driving down the road, shooting the Germans as they drive by. It was a very fun little moment there.
Cool. Right.
But, sorry, what was your next question?
My next question is standard operating procedure. What's your tactical method when you're standing at the table? What do you think about when you're actually there?
This again goes back to I did a lot of doubles tournaments with one of my buddies back in the day, and we discussed a lot in depth of what are we looking at when we go to the table, especially in doubles tournaments. You have to think about that even more because you have 2 brains that might not be on the same objective pattern. So that was actually really formative in how I look at a table and decide what I want to do, is having those conversations with a teammate. And kind of the rubric or the methodology we worked through and discovered was, what is it I need to I apologize, I got a little head cold here this last week. What are the objectives to win the mission? Because that's why we're on the table. We're here to win the mission. And whether that's killing enemy units or taking objectives or holding objectives, getting an objective and bringing it back to your board, what is it that I have to accomplish? And then I look at my list and I say, what are my best, you always end up with a sniper with SMG running to grab an objective at the end of the game.
That happens. Yeah.
But what's my plan A? What are my most efficient units for dealing with winning the game? actually scoring the objective. And I kind of, again, in my mind, I make a budget. Like I budget those units for objective securing, objective taking. So those guys are no longer accounted for in the plan moving forward. So then the next question I have is, what are the things that my opponent has that will prevent me? What are the number one things that my opponent has that will prevent me from accomplishing the objective? If they're running a horde list of inexperienced infantry, my infantry can just push through those without a lot of problem. But their 2 or 3 howitzers that they have, those are going to cause a problem for me. So I look at what's the problem units that I need to address, and what in my army is best suited for dealing with those problems. And I look and, well, if one of the guys that's already been allocated to scoring the objectives is also the best thing for dealing with that problem, either that's great because he can do it on the way, or I need to think,
or you're in trouble.
Swap him out, and he's now a problem. He's now, for dealing with problems, I need to put somebody else back into the plan A. Like I need to, so I start looking before I even put a model on the table. I'm in my mind allocating what resources are doing what job, and what is going to be what's the plan A. For dealing with
do you actually write some of that down sometimes, or is that when you're just standing there looking at the opponent's list?
If I was being a responsible adult, I would be. I will say at Warzone, with having all the lists published, I'm kind of changing some habits, because with Infinity tournaments, which I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, you don't get the list until you show up to your opponent, and even then, you only have a skeleton of a list.
Only the public information for Infinity, right? There's units that can be non-disclosed. Yeah,
which is a great little feature of that game. But
it's a great feature. Yeah. Yeah,
so
I also love the actual where we can hide the models, take a picture of where the model is at on the table, and then just not show the opponent until you want to reveal it. That mechanic is brilliant. Really brilliant. Wish they brought that into bolt action.
It would be an interesting thing for snipers, forward observers, artillery observers. It would be a fun mechanic. Anyway, I digress on that.
Sorry.
Warzone Atlanta was probably the first time I've been to a tournament where I've both had the list available. I've been knowledgeable enough, because WTC we had the list available, but I wasn't knowledgeable enough to be able to look at a list and be like, "Oh, that's a
this
problem.
Is what it does." Yeah.
So I actually did that for Atlanta. Actually, on the drive down, because again we had a 6-hour drive. Steve and he had his iPad or phone, and we went through every single list that was going to be at the tournament, and we were like, is this one we even need to talk about? No. Okay, move on to the next one. Is this a 20 order British India list? Yeah.
Maybe we should discuss. Yeah.
And we discussed what are kind of our general philosophies for handling that list going to be. With that one, it's play cagey, keep your guys together, stay away from the bulk of the stuff, and try to pick off small units where you can. Because pins are going to be a problem. You're going to be putting lots of pins on you. It's going to be, you don't want to get stuck and pinned down against that list. And which actually in that game ended up being counterproductive, because I was trying to move too much and wasn't dealing with some of the pins. Anyway, so that's kind of, before I even get to the table, like I was in the hotel room I knew who my opponent was going to be the next day. So I was reviewing that list. I was going to be Randy with the US list with the one M3 and the Rangers. And I was reviewing it. How am I going to deal with that? Thinking through it. I actually did that, and it worked. It panned out. And then, so once I've done all the list stuff, then you show up at the table. And I always try to show up early.
That's always like a good baseline, because make sure you're there and make sure everything is ready, just because there's so much that can go wrong and you can get distracted by all kinds of stuff, and it can take time.
And I want to know, the second tables are assigned, and John was very good about that. Like as soon as we walked in, we knew the tables were already assigned. As soon as I know where that table is, I want to be the first person at the table, because I want to get down. I want to look. I want to check line of sight. I want to see. I want to read. Because again, John, I feel like I'm being superlative, but he earns it on all of the phenomenal things. He had placards on every table that described how the scenery should be played.
Yeah.
And I wanted to show up, know the table as best as I could from both sides, see the lines of advance, see how that's going to correspond to the mission I'm playing.
That also gives you like a little bit more time to make a plan in your head than your
Correct.
opponent, who maybe comes late, who maybe he's not prepared, he hasn't read your list, so he's going to need to read your list while he's setting up his minis and everything's getting ready. So
specific and anecdotally, it works out well for that particular match against Randy. It was kind of a Sicilian-looking town, and the secondary objective was, or the primary objective was holding the middle of the board. No, that was the secondary. Hold the middle of the board. Primary was killing other guys in close combat or taking them captive.
Yeah.
And I was able to get to the board. I look, okay, the middle's kind of dense with these cities. There's more room to move on the right side. So I did the thing where I deployed more to the left side, but not too far. Like I deployed my lieutenant way on the left side. I deployed my mortar way on the left side.
Oh, you're luring him. Yeah.
And he did. He started, because you got 5 points if you killed a lieutenant in close combat. Like, a lot of points. So, which he did. And then my dodge shot the squad and killed the squad, and they ran off the board. So he didn't get the points for it. But anyway, I started doing that. And then I saw there's all these buildings blocking line of sight, and there's a road that runs kind of on diagonal behind the buildings. So I set up my infantry. As soon as the game started, I started shifting, using those central buildings to block line of sight. And I rolled the Hellcat up the right side and got that line of sight all the way down the road. And he had to drive forward down an alley, exposing the rear of his M3 to my side of the board. It was his only option other than and then the bazooka. I rolled the bazooka up because it was still late, shot the bazooka right down the alley, hit the Stewart in the rear. I mean, it worked out exactly how I'd hoped. He started bringing squads in on the left. There was a squad in a building of Rangers, brought my Jeep in, hit him with a flamethrower. Just all those things that I discussed worked out how I hoped. And conversely, his alarm, I don't know what it was. He was a local guy, so he wasn't at the hotel. He showed up after the round had started. So he didn't even show up until the round had started. So I'd already set my stuff on the side I wanted.
Yep.
Like, if he shows up, this is the side I want. And he showed up. I don't even remember who won the dice roll. I got the side I wanted. He's trying to put models on the board while I'm already setting up my plan. So he was on the back foot from the beginning.
This is really nice because it confirms something that we've suspected for some time. We can't really prove it, but this suspicion is that it's not your list that wins you the game. It's your preparation and your skill level that wins you the game. And what you're describing here is you have more prep time than the opponent. The opponent is just thinking on his feet. You've already made your plan, and that plan, you stick to it and you win. That is what I've been arguing for quite a long time now. So I'm really happy to hear you describe this situation for me, Ryan. It's spot on what my feeling about the game is. That it's a lot of it is preparation.
In preparation too, there are some things I could have changed in my list with more preparation, and that's experience too. That
of course, preparation and skill level. Yep. That makes sense. Right. So what was your toughest match of the day?
Man, it was 100% the 20 order dice British list that had the free artillery observer free squad. It was the final result was 4-2, which was the primary objective. You had to get 2 or more order dice kills than the opponent, which I got, skin of my teeth. The secondary objective, I don't honestly recall. I didn't get it. Neither of us did. That list, he brought in his artillery strike. It hit exactly dead center of a clump of my guys. I had one of my 9-man squads. He rolled not the template, but he rolled the maximum amount of pins that you could put on the squad. And then my medic, he actually rolled a 6-4, so he got the template on top of the medic, which, and then the template, because it's just the one model, he could just put a small. I mean, he's a lot of maneuvering with that. He was able to clip the back end of that 9-man squad, and then I think he rolled for maximum number of pins for them as again. No casualties. I mean, maybe 1 or 2 casualties on the squad, but they then immediately had 9 pins on them, and then he just plinked something, pinned them off the board. So I had a 9-man. I think it was still 8. There's still 7 veterans.
9 veterans just gone
off the board, and the medic got splatted. So those were the two order dice he pulled. The rest, pretty much the rest of that match was me. Again, I deployed with the idea of shifting. There was some line of sight blocking stuff in the very middle of the board. It was my Hellcat covering pretty much everybody else unassing themselves from where they were. It was me trying. It was pretty much the entire game was me taking rally checks, going down, or issuing run orders. Like that was pretty much the match. It was me just trying to stay away from him. And I got, at the end of the game, there was a little hut, and I rolled my Jeep up and put my flamethrower team in it. And then even though he had 20 order dice and I had at that point 13, or he had maybe 18 at the time, I got first pull my flamethrower team because he had a flamethrower in his squad. I got very lucky on dice pull. I was able to flamethrower his squad. They ran off the board or were all killed. And then he rolled on with his, he had a Piat team that came in and close range. I mean, not 6-inch, but it was like in that good range. Shot at I had my recce Jeep, and I was like, no, I'm not going to recce. I took the Piat round, survived, and maybe got a pin or 2, and then returned fire and killed the Piat team with the recce Jeep for an order die. And I mean, I picked up 2 other little ones. My Hellcat hit the motorcycle with sidecar with a anti-tank round. I mean, I was picking up little bitty order die here or there just as I can, I'd make some very risky plays. And Alan was a fun opponent. And I don't want to air dirty laundry, but I talked to him too about this. He agrees. He was out of his depth on playing a 20. He was used to playing with buddies where you take a smoke break in the middle of the match, you go get a beer and have dinner, come back, and over a day almost get a game in. So he was running 20 order dice, and he didn't have the experience in a time. And
that list that he was using, it takes a lot of experience to get to use well. It on paper it seems very powerful. A lot of those very powerful lists can be very powerful, but it does take some getting used to.
We had 3-round tournament, 3-hour rounds for the tournament, which is very generous.
It is.
WTC was 2 hours.
Yeah. 2 hours and 15 minutes or something like that. Yeah.
And we only finished turn 4.
Oof.
Yeah, that was the only game. That was the only game we didn't finish over the course of the tournament. Only turn 4. I 100%, had we have gone the full 6 rounds, I mean, he probably would have tabled me.
Yeah.
But I mean, because there's only so much room you can hide in on the table.
Yeah.
And the Gurkhas were about ready to get up on me. If he'd played a little more aggressive, he spent a turn kind of hiding behind a building when he should have just run out and forced the issue. He should have played more aggressive on my left flank, and chased that tail end of my shifting line more. But especially with that squad.
But I mean, when you got 20 order dice, you also need to play very, very fast in order to actually get to have your usable units contact the enemy, especially if you have close combat troops like Gurkhas. You really need the time to get off the board. So yeah.
And I don't, if you recall the list, I think he had 3 of the machine gun motorcycles.
He did.
He didn't get to use, because those are, the longer the game goes, the more effective those are, as you're dumping pins and dumping pins and dumping pins and pinning my army down so that his Gurkhas can come in and do their work.
But then they need the time to do that.
But if you don't make it to turn 6, you don't get that pin advantage.
Yep.
But that was my one where I was sweating bullets the whole time. I remember telling Steve in the car on the way down, I was like, man, the one list I don't want to have to play against is this one. I got it round 1 turn. And I'm pretty sure that was John. I think John might have had some hand in first round pairings where he wanted to pair new guys with other new guys and more veteran players. And I think he's just like, oh, this would be good practice for Ryan. Let's give him this list.
Well, do you feel like you need the practice by now?
Yes. Yeah. Again, I would not. Had Alan have played that list to its potential, I do not think I probably would have won that match. So that was him not living up to his full potential, not necessarily me outplaying him.
Yeah,
because it was certainly his match to win.
Yeah. Right. Ryan, I think we've actually talked about the last one, which was list building. Do you have anything you want to add? You already talked about your Dave Ramsey methodology of list building. Is there anything you would want to add at the end there for that?
I'd say really, as you can see from my list, I'm not exactly one that's ever bought into whatever the meta is.
No, anti-meta is good.
I never played in Infinity. I never played my Ariadne guys the way you're supposed to. Everybody said that you're playing them wrong, and I have pretty good results with them. In Warhammer, I played my Imperial Guard wrong, and I had pretty good results with them. So I really do have a component of like, this is what I want to put on the table. This is what I want to present to my opponent. This is the experience that I want him to have playing against this army. I value that. I have a lot of. I'd rather bring well-painted models than whatever I can slap together for whatever the meta says I should bring to this tournament. Not right. I did get second. I think I got second highest on paint score at the tournament. I like to present a nice-looking army that looks right together. But as far as building, I don't want to say gimmick. That devalues what it is. That's not the word I'm looking for, but lists that double down on a theme or an idea of what they want to do. Like I think at WTC last year, there was a list that had 3 inexperienced M3s. Like that's diving deep into a rabbit hole.
That was one of my guys. No, it actually wasn't one of my guys. It was one of the German guys, the German team captain, Manuel. He had brought 3 inexperienced M3s. Yeah, that was it.
I don't want to. Gimmick's not the word I want to use. It's not gimmicky.
No,
it's
gimmicky sounds too. It just sounds wrong. It has for me. It's a matter of clear army builds. I am a player who likes gimmicky lists or whatever. That's my style. I like certain types of lists. I like motorized infantry. I like assault infantry. I like all that kind of stuff, and that means that you have to double down on it. But it does seem like you're more of a mixed bag, tool bag player.
How my brain looks and uses a list. It just, if I could figure it out, I'd probably be a better player. I'd be a more effective competitive player.
Maybe not. Maybe it's just your play style.
I've always looked at a list first of like, what are the things I need? What's my budget? Like, what are the things I need to do to accomplish the objectives? And I never have been able to feel like I can put together a list like you're talking about with whatever's left over. And if I feel like if I dive into one of those, like I'm doing a mechanized, I don't have the other tools that I want to have. I like having the sniper. I like having the mortar. I like having the flamethrower team. I like having the bazooka. And maybe that's my gimmick. It's just having.
I just think it's your play style. I think there are a lot of players like you that do better with mixed bag, with tool bag lists where you have all the tools that you feel like you need.
Is my list going to do okay if I come up with the 6 Bren carriers with squads of Gurkhas and all of them? Maybe we'll get a chance to see.
Maybe we'll get a chance to see. And that brings us to the end question, which is, of course, so what are you bringing to the WTC?
I haven't settled on anything yet, and I'm probably not going to tell you if I did.
No, you shouldn't. You definitely shouldn't.
I will say that these did all arrive in the mail here the other day.
So they may have something to do with it at some point.
Might have something. So
we don't know. Could be anything. Could be anything.
Could be. So I've been trying to nail John down because obviously I've gotten some interesting feedback from.
Tell your wife that she's on camera.
Yeah, you're on camera being recorded for an
Hi.
online interview.
Great.
Yeah. She's very patient and generous.
Yeah, my wife too. So that's just how it is. Right.
Yeah.
Ryan, we'll I hope to see you at the WTC again. So and maybe even get a game.
Yes, that would be delightful. I'd hope to do that, and if not a game, at least a beer.
Let's do that. Right.
All right.
Enjoy your afternoon, and I'll talk to you again.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. That was it from us today, and cheers.
Cheers.